Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to work with you for this very fast 43 minutes that we have left for this. So, one of the things that I want to just tell a story on myself that's apropos of our coming together today. I don't lose things. You've taken a look too often, right? You've taken a look, if you see the little charts, I can't remember this, I can't remember that, little signs that are reflective of how we operate sometimes. So I was getting out of the house and I had set my keys right where I noticed they were going to be, right? And as I walked out of the house, I looked for my keys and they weren't there. My wife wasn't there and the cats didn't get them. And so I'm thinking, this is really interesting that I've lost my keys, which I rarely do, on the day I'm going to talk about not losing things and memory and things like that. So what goes around comes around, and I'm really happy to be here. I got started, well, I've been doing this kind of thing a long time. I got started in the health and wellness side, and I'll tell this story later on in detail if you want on a break or whatever. I had a heart attack in Singapore in 1986. I had open heart surgery, and I realized there was something else going on in life that I needed to start paying attention to, so I changed my consulting kind of practice a bit, and we can talk about that later. Well, this will be very interactive. By the end of this workshop, you will have a tool or tools that you can use in the workplace or at home or wherever it happens to be, because they're tools around how you work with your mind, how we all work with our minds. And I want to let you know that in my conversation here, there will be no shoulds or oughts. I'm not going to give you a list of what you have to do. This is about what we want to do and what we can learn to do. And it has to do with, we really want to be able to operate in a way that says, let's take a look at what we can learn to do with ourselves and how we operate that will help us, the organization, my family, etc. So that's its angle. Now, I'm going to ask you to be interactive. And the first thing I'd like you to do is if you turn to a neighbor and just tell them what you want to learn from this 42 minutes that we have left. What do you want to learn? Let's just talk to a neighbor, and then I'm just going to hear a few people's comments. Please, tell us what you're going to learn.
A little bit at night when I'm sleeping.
Okay.
Yes, it does. If you don't sleep, you don't sharpen. Well, I sharpen it during the day, but if I'm too busy, I can't sort through it.
Okay, let's just hear from a few people in terms of what you heard your neighbor say that they want. We're not going to hear from everybody, just volunteers, popcorn it. What did your neighbor say about what they wanted to learn? Let's just hear about that. Who will be first? Yes, sir.
He just wants to be able to remember.
Just to remember. Okay, good point. Very good. I'll try to remember that. Okay. What else people want to learn?
How to manage money.
How to manage money. Okay, that'll be next week. That's next week. Okay, all right, that's the other one. Okay, what else you want to learn? What kinds of things you want to learn? Yes.
Trying to slow down my brain when I'm trying to sleep.
Okay, how many folks have that as okay. Okay, slowing down your brain when you're trying to sleep. Okay, very good. Other things that what people want to learn? Yes, ma'am. Remembering names. Okay, very good. Pardon? Yeah, and you do remember your own. That's always the first test. What's my name, and then who's everybody else? That's the way it seems to operate. Okay. Well, we're going to take a look at what it is that's kind of going on that we have a difficult time remembering names sometimes, or our mind has run away. How many people have get a really good night's sleep every night? Okay, all right, well, moving from there. Okay, very good, very good. Very good. Okay, how many folks here, let's think about memory. How many folks here would work at seems to be a fast pace? How many, what's the pace? You're working at a fast pace? Okay, very good. So in terms of what happens when you're working at a fast pace?
Things fall through the cracks.
things fall through, and we call that we forgot them, but they fell through the crack. How can I remember, etc. So we're going to look at what we're really talking about when we're talking about memory, and there are lots of checklists that we can have for things you can do to remember this, or how to count in a way that it comes back to you. However, at the bottom of that is how we manage ourselves, how we manage our emotions, how we manage our energy, how we manage what we focus on. How does that track? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. I want to give you some tools, a couple of tools that will help us deal with this issue of how we manage our mind. And we're going to take a lens of mind, body, the whole schools of thought, from perennial wisdom traditions from the East to what's going on in current neuropsychology and neurobiology about how our minds really work. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that is and how that impacts us. So the first thing I would like to do is I'm going to introduce to the idea of, because this will be interactive, the idea of, and we're going to teach, I'm going to teach you to actually figure out a way, not figure out, but do away from moving from one piece of work, one environment, one set of tasks, one meeting, one family to home situation, so that you don't carry over what you just did into what you're going to do. How many of us kind of are anticipating our next step while we're doing our current step? How many of us do that? Does that stress you a bit? Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're going to work with. And I want to give you an example, and we're going to talk about 4 things. This is the only piece that has, we have some handouts for you. We're going to talk about how you manage your mind and what's going on in current neuroscience that helps us think about how we manage our minds. And this will make sense, even though the words are going to be sort of odd. They were for me anyway, but this will make sense once we talk about it a little bit. So there are 5 breakthroughs that have taken place, and let me just go to the better one. Okay, we have I'm going to go very quickly before we get into action. We have a negativity bias. We are hardwired for negativity. You ever notice? How many folks do you, I know you're not this way. Of course you're not this way, but run into folks who could close the light in a room just by their walking into the room. How many of us do that? Okay. Yes, we do. That's right. We don't do that here. We're specially selected, but everybody else out there can have a poll on what goes on. So, and also, how many folks here have little voices in their heads? How many folks? It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay. How many folks? Okay. How many folks actually speak those voices? No. Hopefully you don't. You do. That's right.
That's why I'm not crazy.
That's right. That's right. You keep talking to them. They're all there. Their voices. So, one of the upside. I'll talk about each one of these very briefly before we do an activity around it. But the interesting aspect of neuroscience in the last 6 years that has been known for thousands of years, but now science says it's cool, is that you can change your mind to change your brain, to change your mind for the better. Our brains are, it's called neuroplasticity. They're never the same all the time. In fact, our conversation here, the way it works, our brains work, you will not be the same when you leave here as you are now, and nor will I, because we're always impacting each other. And we're always rewiring our brains. And so when we learn to think about we can rewire our brains for the better, there's some tools to do that, we'll touch on one. It opens up some interesting possibilities. How many of us wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, oh, God, I wish it were Friday. Oh, do I have to go back in? How many? I mean, no, not to this place. Saturday. Oh, do I have to get up and do the lawn? Oh. So what's the voice that comes up when you wake up? Just something to pay attention to. So so we have there's an aspect of we are emotionally contagious. That is, we are like neural Wi-Fi, and this is brain research looking at fMRI, sort of saying, here's what's going on when people get together and what's going on in here. So when you think about, we are always interacting and connecting with other people, and we are picking up what they are thinking or feeling. Now, how many folks are married? So you know this already, right? You know this already. You walk in the room. Does your spouse know how you're thinking or feeling by how you walk in the room? Yes. Yeah? Okay, they do. They get it. This is about how our brains operate. We just get it. Now we think of, so we walk in the room and we get it. Now, if I wake up in a bad mood, does my spouse know it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what happens to my spouse when I wake up in a bad mood? What happens to her? What, he leaves? Is that what? He's out of there. He's just out of there. I'm just really out of there. Okay, I'm so far out of here. Exactly. Now, I don't do this. Well, I won't talk about my spouse. But anyway, she could be here and it would be okay. So we are emotionally contagious. We don't even know we're picking up from other people. Yet we are. And it's impacting how we think and how we feel, etc. Ask you another question, then we'll talk about how to use this a little later on. How many folks wake up in the morning and set your mood? How many folks decide what your mood is going to be? Okay? You do? Okay, excellent. Other
Two.
So what do you do when you set your mood? How do you set your mood?
Music.
Music? Okay, good. How do you set your mood?
This is the day the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it.
Okay, so you have a way of thinking about it, of framing it, making it out loud. The thinking about it, having a frame for it, and speaking it is all mind-body connection kinds of stuff. What we say has an impact on others. What we say has an impact on ourselves. And by the way, what we think about ourselves has an impact on what? How do we think about ourselves? What's it impact? How we feel, how we show up. Okay, so what I would like to do is just to do something real quickly. If we could pass these out, thank you, my dear. Is just take a card, and we're going to talk about this idea of a kind of a bias that we have, and we're going to have a little bit of an experiment so we get to know what our thinking processes are like. Okay? There are no right or wrong answers here. Okay, what I would like you to do is just put down, and please do not put your name on it. You don't have to put your name on it. Just put down one statement that you continually get from an inner voice that is not helpful for you. So an inner voice, any statement that your voice is telling you, this is a reoccurring thing, there you did it again, Jim.
Does everybody have a card yet? Raise your hand if you don't have a card.
Okay. Okay, just any voice, any internal conversation, this dialogue. There's a refrigerator hum in the back of our minds going all the time, saying this and saying that. So what's one thing comes out of the refrigerator hum that you're telling yourself? Okay, just write it down real quickly. Just anything. Either one. Either one. Either one. Either one. Helpful or not helpful? Helpful or not helpful?
Everybody have a card?
Okay, just put it down, and we'll
Will you repeat it?
yes. Okay, what we'd like you to do is take a card. Listen to, you have this voice. We talked about the voice in the back of our head, this conversation that we have. We think of it sometimes as our thinking. There, you've done it again. Uh-oh, you missed the point on that. Are you always going to be that way? How come you did that? What were you thinking? You said those kinds of voices that we have. So just write down any one that comes up for you that is not necessarily helpful, that is there on a reoccurring basis. If you don't have them, you have positive ones, that's okay too. But what the little voice that comes up, we call it an inner critic. It's there, always there. You can depend on this voice to say something to you about what you're doing, about what you're thinking, about what you should have done, you could have done. Make sense? You got one? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do is just gather at your table and take your packet and go to another table and give it to them and take their packet and bring it back. So you won't know whose you've gotten. You don't know whose you've gotten. So just make sure they get mixed up. If you could go ahead and just exchange, yeah, you can exchange it. You can just make sure you get them exchanged since it doesn't work table to table. Yeah, that's great. Just make sure you get them exchanged. Okay. Again, there are no right or wrong answers here. I know yours is right because you're the oldest guy in the room except for me. So yours has got to be really wise. That's right. Me too. Way beyond it. All right. Okay. Now, I hope you can read them. I'm not going to ask for everybody's, but what I would like to do. All right. You got them all mixed up. You don't have your own and you don't have your neighbors. Okay, here's what we're going to do. What I'd like to do is ask from this table an example of one of the papers, the sheets that you have, and read it with the affect or the emotion or the information that conveys. So just, what's yours? Yes, go ahead, yeah. Okay, listen up. We're going to learn what goes on inside of our heads. Okay. Okay, go ahead again.
I'm tired.
I'm tired. I'm tired. Okay. How about this table? Something from one from your table. It's going to be a hard day. I'm tired. Okay, very good. How about yours? The one that you have.
Stop being lame.
Stop. I'm tired. It's going to be a hard day. Stop being lame. What about you?
Should I get that donut in the lunchroom?
Very good. Very good. That's one of those iffy voices. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe it's not. You don't know. You don't know. Okay. So stop being lame. Another one. How about from your table? I'm getting old. Ooh. Ooh. I've heard that one before. I hear that one a lot. Okay, how about you? Your was...
Oh, another one?
Yes.
Could have done this differently.
Could have done this differently. So I apologize for that. There we go. Could have done this differently. Okay, two more. Okay, how about you all? Something from there.
I need to do this and work all that. What's the next step?
Okay, very good. And one more. One more. Yes.
Probably could have handled that better.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Could have handled that better. Boy, is this lame, etc. Notice the nature of that. And that's self-talk. And this is not to make you feel badly. This is a human condition, by the way. This idea that these voices are going on, that there's this negative self-talk that's going on. It is universal. It's in India, Africa, the Aboriginals in Australia, and the North Americans here all have the same set of voices that are talking to them about how they are showing up. This is called the default mode network, and it's going to be important for us as we get into this activity in a little bit to recognize that we have. So what do you notice about, what kind of aggregate do you make? What was your response to those voices? How did that feel when you heard those voices? How do you feel?
More negative.
Pardon me?
More negative.
More negative. What else? Yes.
Low energy.
Low energy. Okay. What else?
Maybe feel sad.
Sad. What about that was sad, if you don't mind?
The negativity of it. I mean, just that you feel so poorly.
Yes. That's a.
I think it goes along with self-doubt, like you're doubting yourself.
Yes. Yes, you are. So as we think about that, and we're doubting ourselves, if I wake up in the morning and I say, I'm tired, and that's my conversation, how am I during the day?
Tired.
Tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. Or if I get up and with the other kinds of things that you didn't say what were you thinking, but so what was it? What's the impact of those voices on our physiology? What do you think?
Stress.
Stress. And how does that show up? How does stress show up in our physiology?
Interactions you have with other people.
Right. Exactly. It does.
Health.
Pardon me?
Poor health.
Poor health, exactly. Stress has, as we know, overabundance of stress, sort of unregulated and also and misunderstood, and there's a whole body of work on that, can lead to physical disabilities. So I'd like to try another, so we have a default mode network and some that kicks in, and there are actually 4 dimensions, and we got a handout that if you want to look at it, you can go into what those are. For our purposes, it's sufficient to know it's going on, the conversations are generally negative, unless we take control over them. And when we start to notice what the conversation is, and we start to take control over it, or we influence it, is when we begin to have a different kind of impact on how our day might unfold. So that's a thought. Let's try a little something now. And I'm going quickly because there's a lot to talk about, and I want you to get it as well. So let's stand up, if you don't mind. Everybody get a chance to stand up. And I'm going to, okay, very good. And you don't have to touch anybody, okay? No touching. You don't have to worry. I know, but you don't have to touch anybody. Yeah. I mean, they call this stuff in some quarters touchy-feely. We're not touching. All clothes stay on, no touching. We're just gonna. Okay, so. Oh, no touch. Oh. Don't talk. I forgot what it is. Yeah. Don't tell. Don't tell. Whatever it is. Okay. So I'm gonna just get comfortable, and just eyes kind of towards the ground, and I'm gonna kind of give you a scenario. So the scenario is you wake up in the morning, and you have a report that's due, and you realize you've overslept. And then you realize too that you'd worked so late you hadn't finished the report that night. So your intention was to have gotten into the office early. So you jump out of bed, you call, and you've got a message saying, I hope you can get in early because I'd like to go over the report with you. I'm starting to sweat. Okay, exactly. And then as you get out to the car, the kids, they say it's your birthday, and you say, I'll be back early. They jump on you, and you really got to get out because you just got the call. You go out and you have a flat tire. So what's going on in your mind now? Time to go back to sleep, exactly. Okay. So, all right. So now notice your posture. Where are your eyes? How are your shoulders? What are you feeling? Defeat, The sweating, defeat. What else is going on? Depressed, exactly. Yeah, so let's shake that out. Okay. Same day, birthday. You're there, kids jump in, they're there, they have a cake for you, they put one less candle on the cake so you feel really good that they don't even know how old you are. And you realize you have to get to the office, and so you get up and you say, it's gonna be fine, and you get a call, and you've got the report to do to finish up. You also have the meeting to go to, and you get a call, and it's your boss, and he says, and your name is? What's your name? Mark. Mark, happy birthday. You don't have to come in today. We postponed the meeting because it's your birthday. And we really want you to have a great time. Just stay with the kids. If you come in the afternoon, it's all right, and we'll take care of it. Okay? The kids come in with the cake. There you are. And it says, oh, by the way, I have tickets for you for, what do you like, the O's? Okay, I've got tickets for you, the Bay. Okay, the Ravens. Okay, got Ravens tickets for you, and you can pick them up, and it's for the playoff game or whatever. So happy birthday. So how do you feel?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that feel good? Now, so we had two different feeling states, right? Where are the tickets? I've got them in the car. I owe you. I'll get you your ticket. So if you notice, how did you feel on that second time? What? Just some popcorn. What'd you feel? What kind?
Later.
Lighter. What else? Relief. Okay. What else? Happy. Okay. So First scenario, you walk into the office after the first scenario. What's your demeanor going to be in the office after that first scenario? Flat tires, etc.
Anxiety.
Okay, anxiety, right. And so you walk in, Mark walks in, he's down, I'm the boss, I'm got here, he's feeling anxiety. I get hit, and so what do I feel?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Because it's contagious. Because I have just caught his anxiety. And we're all that way all the time. We are catching each other's anxieties, our feeling states, the way in which we show up, and it's transmitted in a number of different ways in terms of, including how we breathe and how we stand and how we project ourselves. It all shows up. So if Mark goes into the office and he's looking for the tickets, what's the vibe he's giving off? Happy. Okay, so I run into him and he's smiling. What's my inclination if he's smiling?
Smile back.
Smile back. We cannot help but smile back at somebody who smiles at us cross-culturally. It is just the human condition. If we smile at somebody else, they will smile, generally have a smile back, unless they're into heavy feelings and are caught into something else. But things being equal. Okay, good. You can sit down. Thanks, Mark, for being okay. So we've taken a look a little bit. So, by the way, on that negativity idea that we gave of those voices that go, the neuropsychologists, social psychologists tell us that we are hardwired 7 times more for the negative than we are for the positive. So if you think about it, an easy way to remember it is positivity is like Teflon and negativity is like Velcro. So the difference between Teflon and Velcro. So positivity slides off of us more easily than negativity sticks to us. So for us to get positivity to stick, we have to be intentional about what we do. And this is where the mind-body kind of thinking takes place, and where the idea of you begin to change your brain, or you change your mind to change your brain. So I want to have a positive attitude, and I began to, so how do I cultivate the attitude? I reinforce that, and it begins to build. It's like, how many people remember records? You know, records? Okay, those of you, that remember records, what happened when you took a needle or a pen and scratched over it like that? What happened?
Skip.
It skipped. Okay, so when we're working with changing our, dealing with the negativity bias and dealing with positivity or negativity, the idea is the more we can get the negativity to skip and we move on to something else, the better off we're going to be. Now, the scientists tell us the record grooves are always going to be there. They're embedded in various parts of our, when we get into the brain science on it, but the negativity is there. However, it doesn't mean it cannot be worked with, and it does not need to be chronic. So kind of a homework thought piece that we haven't put down is to keep track of just how we see the world, and do we see it positively or negatively, or how often are we saying, what I don't like or what I do like? Worrying about the future. Oh shit, sorry, pardon me. Oh darn, what's going to happen in the future? Oh heaven forbid it should happen. Or, did I really screw up or what? So, we don't like something, we're in the future, or we're in the past, or she doesn't like me. We're comparing ourselves.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. So we're comparing to each other. She doesn't like me, she does like me. How come she's got a BMW and I don't have a BMW? Comparison. So those are fallback modes. New Guinea, Australia, India, everywhere. Those are there are 4 dimensions of a fallback mode that are embedded in this negativity bias that we all have as human beings. So as we think about how do we want to show up, how do we consider that we may be dealing with people who've got these voices in the back of their heads that are telling them, I'm too tired, why do I have to do this? All of those kinds of things. Okay, so one other thing, and then I want to give you a practice, is let's do, okay. want to try one more thing in terms of the relationship between the mind and the body and the thinking. So we get this idea that we can have some control over this or some influence. So I'd like to you to stand up again. This is the last activity like this. And this is something, something that is called the Wonder Woman pose. Anybody hear about Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman? Now, you've seen a TED Talk on that or something like that. Basically the theory, and it's a little refuted, but basically the theory, I mean, the science of it is not, it's just how she presented it. But how many have seen the movie Wonder Woman? What'd you think? The new one, Cool, wasn't it? Really cool. You need to see that. That's right. That'll get Ravens tickets. No, I'll get you the Wonder Woman tickets. Okay.
Not as epic.
Oh, okay.
I hear a lot of negativity around that.
Okay, very good. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, and here's the way this works, and I'll tell you what we're going to do, and then what you're going to experience with it, and what biochemically is going on. So, legs sort of hip width apart. We're not going to do yoga, but we could, but this is not yoga. Hands on your hip, chest back. Take a deep breath, and just stand like this, as tall as you can. Your forehead, your head up towards the ceiling, and stand, knees slightly bent. Just breathe normally, but just stand this way. Just stand this way. So, and the idea, we won't do it for 2 minutes, but the idea is if you do this for 2 minutes before you go from one meeting to another, or one situation to another, or you think about being mindful. Just being mindful is remembering, oh, maybe if I did this. This is what you've heard about mindfulness and all of those practices. This is being mindful. There are lots of roots to it. One of them is noticing what you do and how to change it. That's about that aspect of mindfulness. So, if you decide, I know people who actually use something like this. I'm going to teach you how to do this from a little bit more centered place before we end today in terms of getting quiet and then moving to this so that you can use this when you go from one place to another. But the idea is what you're doing is building up testosterone in the system when you go to this stance. And that in so doing, you're moving into a dimension of a kind of power. And it doesn't mean estrogen's not there. It comes out in a different form. But this is a way to access a kind of powerful place that you're intentionally going to that would not be the place that you would go to naturally if you got up and the voice said, I'm tired. That would not be the place that you would be going to. So the idea in this is that when you hear the voice that is saying, I'm tired, or all of these kinds of things, that if you want to, you can shift exactly how you deal with that at the time and shift the way you see what's going to unfold in your world. And so it sounds really odd, and it sounds like, for those of you that are old enough to remember the 60s hot tubs in Mill Valley, California, where anyway, it's an old joke. They did a lot of very strange things there. This was not made up in hot tubs in Northern California in the 60s. This is not what it really is, sort of the neuroscience. So what does that have to do with, now let's just link this back to memory for a second. If I am here, or I'm tired, what's the chance that my memories are going to be impacted? How might they be impacted? If I'm tired, how might they be impacted? Slowed down. And then if I add I'm late, and then I lose my keys, and then I beat up on myself because I'm losing my memory, whereas maybe I am only just not using my body and my mind in a way that allows me to access more more resources that are resourcefulness in us. So that's Amy Cuddy's. There's a TED Talk on it. You can take a look at it. And if any of this thing is we've got some handouts for you in a little bit. And if anything is interesting to you, get in touch with Karen. We can get you more information if you need it, if you like this kind of stuff. There's a whole body of knowledge. So I'd like you to sit down if you would. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different. We've talked about things that we can do, the way in which we are focusing on how we stand, the voices that we have, and the attention that we pay to what's going on around us. So we're going to do something that is, I'm going to call it, it's kind of arriving. It's a way in which for us to calm down the fires that might be going on, that were going on in me when I couldn't find my keys this morning, and I was trying to figure out, what were my voices, just like everybody else's voices. What do you do when the voices are coming up and you're still late, you still can't find your keys? So this is something. How many of you have done anything around mindfulness training of any sort? Anybody do any mindfulness? You've done some mindfulness stuff? How about any kind of meditative types of things? Anybody do meditation? Okay. How about any kind of yoga or stretching? Okay. Okay. So you're used to kind of this dimension of things, and what we're going to do, and this is a way, building on the neuroscience, to really start to do some things that can change you're going to work with your mind, and as you do this, you're actually intentionally using the idea of our brains are plastic. And through this, we're going to be working with exercising the plasticity of our brains. Now, the way to think about our brains is that our brains are very much like a muscle, not a muscle, they're like a muscle. And what do we know about what you do? How do you make muscles stronger? What do you do? Exercise. Okay. So this is kind of like brain floss, brain exercising. So what I'm going to ask you to do, we're only going to do it for about 4 minutes, okay? And so I'd like you to sit up straight, and we're going to be doing some attention training is one way of thinking about this. We're going to train our attention. So from moving to the external world, we're going to actually, if we just get calm and just look slightly at the ground and begin to pay attention to our breathing. That's all we're going to do for a second. Just notice our breathing. And notice as you inhale the coolness of the breath as it comes in through your nose, and as you exhale the warmth. Just breathe. Just notice any sounds. And any tastes you may have in your mouth. Now bring your attention to the top of your feet. Just any sensations that you have on the top of your feet. Notice any temperature. Notice any sensations in your hands, wherever they are. Bring your awareness to your mind. What are the thoughts? Bring your attention back to your breath and to your nostrils. Now bring your attention back to the room and just slightly open your eyes and just stay peaceful. So how was that? Pardon me? Stimulating? Very good. How was that? What? Pardon me?
Relaxing.
Relaxing. Uh-huh. How else was that for you?
Decluttering.
Decluttering? How was that? How many folks found their attention moving? It was hard to stay on your breath and then your feet. How many of us? It's okay, by the way. And it's actually good because it's the magic to this over time, and these are the kinds of things that take practice. We don't get it the first time. A friend of mine is not a one-walk dog. It's got to keep walking, got to just keep working with it. This is a way, among others, to begin to retrain your mind so that when you are moving into more practice with it, you can decide that you actually want to calm down. And you know you can do that, and you can do it more easily. And the more practice you get, the more you can calm down in a moment. How many folks found their thoughts would go out, and then you could bring them back? How many of us were able to do that? Okay. That is the practice. The going out and coming back. The putting new grooves in the record and bringing it back. Regrooving it and bringing it back. This is really accessing a part of our internal mechanism. We are born with this as a birthright. This set of neural networks that unless we learn how to do it, are dormant. That in order for us to really get good at working that part of our intentional working with how our minds work, it can lay dormant unless we go into some practice. Just like muscles will atrophy, that part of our brain system, unless stimulated. And so why is this important? I mean, so let me just back up a question. When you were in that, were you thinking about the groceries that you have to pick up going home? No. Were you thinking about the report that's on the desk?
No.
No. So again, this is about managing your mind. So, and let's think about memory. If we are in that state, what's the likelihood of our memory being better from that state? It's pretty good. And I think so. What I wanted to do is let you kind of experience that as a way in which to recognizing we have access to this source and resource within our minds that allows us with practice, if we like to, we get to choose to do this. We can cultivate a way of being more peaceful in the moment, not running from pillar to post with our hair on fire. I don't have to worry about hair on fire, but you don't either. But others do have to worry about not running around with our hair on fire trying to get things done, because we have a tool to stop and say, wait. Now this is called, what we just did in some jargon is called a pattern interrupt, and we get to interrupt our patterns. And so here's what I'd like to suggest, and I've got that as a part of homework. And we are almost out of time, so we won't practice it, but I'll explain it to you so you'll know what to do. And it's just to build on the things we've already done. So when you want to interrupt your pattern, and let's take, for example, you have recognized that the time between when you leave here and you get home can be fraught with lots of different kinds of things, including what are you going to do when you get home and you wondered if they cleaned up actually and is the place really a muck or not, and what am I going to have to do to get there? Or I really wish I hadn't have to leave early because there's a lot of work back on my desk and I got to get back there. All of that is about not being present. We're not being present to this moment, which is the only moment we have in our lives, really. Only now. So how do we come back to really fully and experiencing that? So here's the practice, and I have it described, and we won't do it, but I'll describe what we'll do, building on what we've already done. Is that when you begin to recognize that you're moving from let's say going home is always an issue. Let's take that. That you take some time and you get quiet with the breathing. You focus on your nose. Just get quiet. And then you imagine, as you get quiet, then you imagine the kind of pose or the way in which you want to show up when you get home. Have you heard about the idea of owning the room? You own the room by how you stand, how you breathe, and it's a kind of personal presence. So you think about, so intentionally, what do I want to do when I get home? Am I going to run in and yell at the kids? I know they're going to have done something or whatever. Or how am I going to really show up? And so can I be peaceful before I get there so I have an intention about how I'm going to show up, and then I move into action around it. And it's a pause or a pattern interrupt. And it's a way that we can begin to take control and not run amok. We get on automatic pilot so many times. All of us are on automatic pilot a lot of the times. How do we not be on automatic pilot? So this is a taste of a mindfulness practice combined with some other mind-body kinds of things where you can begin to cultivate a different way of showing up. And I'll tell you, what I've seen, if you do a couple of these, and this is a transition thing or a coming together thing from any place that, I mean, it can be going from one meeting to another. If you don't go to meetings, it can be home to work. If it's one conversation to another, the boss is coming down the hall. This is a real example from my own experience, okay? Every time my boss came down, he'd have something about a report or something about a report here, or he'd start in the middle of a sentence, not even say hi, right? Does that make you nuts or what? So when I would hear him coming down the hall, I would breathe, and I would sit in a different posture. I cross my finger for some reason. Just, you know, it's kind of a symbol. It's called an anchor. See the anchor? He'd come in, and now I'm in charge because I'm ready. He was not able to get, and so what happened, and sometimes he was out of control, and most of the time he wasn't, but when he was, it was unpleasant. So what I found myself over time is every time I heard his voice, I automatically did this. I didn't even know I did it. So that's a little further. There are things you can do with your mind and your body to get you ready for difficult situations that you're just not caught off guard with. So back to this practice that we just did. So give it a try. Any kind of time you're going from a transition, one task to another, rather than jumping into the next one. I know if I'm finishing one, then I've got the other one laid out, and I realize when I get into that one, I've lost energy. So there's no such thing, by the way, the last thing I'll say about this, there's no such thing as multitasking. There's no such thing as effective multitasking. Just to think about that, because the way the brain works is that it needs some downtime between tasks, even if it's just a quiet thing. And what happens is, and we all know this, we all have social media and phones that ring and texts that all of this kind of stuff. And we know how many of us have had the experience where we're really working on something and the kids come in or the texts come in and our attention goes, and our attention goes. And then how long does it take to get back to that task? It takes a long time. So every time a task is interrupted like that, because as we're trying to multitask and we're not managing our mind, we're not being as effective and efficient as we can be. And I'll just end on the fact, and we live in an addictive society around the chronic overboogie anyway, in terms of all the information that's coming in. So I just wanted to give you a taste of some of the mind-body things as related to how we manage our mind and our memory. Hope it's helpful, and I've got a couple of handouts for you and we've got some practices for at home as well. So let me tell you what the handouts are, so you can refer back to what we've talked about. And then I think we've got some.
We have a little piece of homework that
Piece
we'd
of
like
homework
people to
that-
do for themselves, and then email me and let me know that you've completed it.
Okay, very good. And before we go into that, questions? Any questions? Since what questions do you have about what we've talked about? Because I've gone fast. So.
Are there
Yeah.
any medications or food additives that can help preserve your brain?
Actually, there are some things that have been touted. There's ginkgo biloba or something like that. I'm not aware of any supplements that have been really tested to say there are. There are all kinds of things about luminosity, sort of mind training, and those kinds of things there's not medicines, but it's to look at them very carefully. But I don't know any medicines that really enhance them as much as learning how to, actually what you're doing is you're opening, your mind and your brain is a pharmacy. So you're going to your internal pharmacy to access the biochemical parts of your mind so that nature, in fact, takes care of those things. And a good bottle of scotch comes in. Oh, no, that's a whole different thing.
I was hoping you'd say
Yeah, I was just hoping I would say that. Okay. So, other questions? Other? Yes, ma'am.
What would you suggest when your job is multitasking?
Well, one of the things would be able to, for the sake of efficiency and effectiveness, my guess, well, what would you say, and I'll answer that. What would others say about when your job is multitasking and you really, and it's not working for you, what can you do? What might you do?
ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, excellent, yeah, absolutely, ask for help. What else could people do? Yes?
You can only do one thing at a time.
Yeah. And so I think, that is a mindset. So what is the conversation that needs to take place that honors the fact that we need to multitask, and of course we do. So how do we multitask efficiently and effectively? And sometimes it's chunking things, not trying. How many of us wait, we have a task to do. How many of us sort of say, okay, when I have the time, then I will sit down, and then I need 6 hours, right? How many of us do that in our minds? How many of us ever get 6 hours? No. So it's how do you be okay with triaging it? How do you, chunking it and step by step? So the idea here from a wellness or a well-being perspective is what are the kinds of things that you can do to take care of yourself in the context of an organization with responsibilities that honors you and the organization, so that it works for everybody. So everybody gets stuff, So, and I know there's more to it than that, but multitasking is a difficult kind of, it is. Also, pay attention for multitasking. I'll get into my head. When I'm multitasking, got a lot of things to do, there is an adrenaline rush that comes up. How many of us have an adrenaline rush when we got a lot to do? We're really going. And that can be both positive for us, and it also can be detrimental. And it depends on how we play it, because it's a dance of tasks and a dance of getting things done and relaxing. And another thing to remind you of is that, I'll ask you a question then. So how many of us have a lot to do and we get going and we're working our tail off and we just run out of energy? How many of us run out of energy when we're just working hard? It's okay. It's a non-attribution here. Okay. So forgive yourself. There is a natural cycle to the kind of energy that you get into to get tasks done. And some of us have 20 minutes, and some of us have 15, and maybe some have 30. But at some point, there's a point of diminishing return in terms of the concerted energy, because you're using your brain, and the prefrontal cortex has only so much oxygen it can process until it needs a break. Even if it's just playing Donkey Kong. That dates me, right? It does. I never played it. I don't even know. Even if they don't have Donkey Kong anymore. So another kind of thing about managing our minds is be gentle on yourself. Since we're talking about being gentle on ourselves, be gentle on yourself and the voices that come up and tell you that you really ought to be able to do this, and you had this task to do and you just don't feel like it because you've run out of steam, and you pound yourself until you run out of more steam, and then you wake up, or not wake up, but you turn around and you're depressed. While a shift in that can be recognizing we only have so much go-to energy, we got to back it off. And we do that as athletes. There's only so much you can do, but the body will naturally store the energy you need to come back and do the task. So we set some parameters for ourselves in terms of the energy that we try to muster, and to be gentle on ourselves. And the last thing, since we're talking, yes, ma'am, yes. You raised you moved. Oh, okay, don't move, just don't move. So the last thing, and I know we need to go, the last thing is in terms of, I had up here willpower, and there's a willpower instinct. Now, how many of us have made New Year's resolutions? How many of us have done that? All right, how many of us for last January are still keeping our resolutions? Whoops, good for you, good for you. Excellent. So the idea of New Year's resolutions and setting these goals, how many of us struggle with Krispy Kremes? I do, Dunkin' Donuts, okay, all of this stuff. So there are 3 kinds of willpower in the neuroscience. There's I will, I won't, and I want. And what the research is showing that the I will is I'm going to do it, I will do this. This works the same energetic parts of the brain that the brakes are in. So I will, or I won't. I'm not going to do that. That is the white knuckling aspect of trying to change behavior, whether it's Weight Watchers or whatever it happens to be. A way of thinking about it is there's an I want power. And folks move into getting things and sticking to their diets or their routines or whatever when they're able to connect to something that is outside of just the task getting it done. Because when you access the I won't and I won't and I will, it accesses a part of the brain that is the same part of the brain that made the problem in the first place. When you go to an I want, it accesses another part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that allows you possibilities and to access different parts of your mind. So it actually pulls you. So you don't want to push and resist, you want to be pulled. So what is it about this task that I can create that I don't want to do that links it into something higher, that it actually pulls me, rather than something I got to do? And when we start moving more and more in our lives, in a sense, to the things that pull us in that direction, it makes it a lot easier to do the things that will help us be a higher version of ourselves. And that's what the I will, I won't power. So this is a look at some of the neurosciences related to the mind, that's related to how we operate our minds. And so I know we've run over time, and I just want to, I appreciate, thank you for your time. I want to give you a couple of things. This is the mind, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm
These are
good.
the 2 you want?
Yeah, these are the 2. There's one here, it's called the collecting practice, which is that practice we just talked about in terms of you get quiet, and then you stand, and then before you go from meeting to meeting or home to, home to not home. So that's what that is. And the other one is a series of thoughtful practices, and we're going to ask you, I think we've asked you there are 22 of them, we've asked you to pick 2 that you play around with. And these are practices that sort of say, all right, how do I really pay attention to how I'm feeling right now? Oh, that's new information, that's new wiring for us. So these are just things you can do. No shoulds or oughts. This is not about should and ought, by the way. Should and ought are the kinds of things that close down parts of the brain that make it more difficult for us to conform. So that's why I said we won't use should and ought in our conversation here, because that actually, when we use should and ought that way, it actually triggers something that makes us feel about 5 years old. But we all know about that, that's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are a couple of things. So we got the collection practice, and then we got the mindfulness practices. There are a list of things, reflective things that you can do. You want to, Karen, you want to say something about the homework that you want? Oh, you got something to fill, just to let us know that you've done a couple of things. Is this the? Here it is, right here. Thank you.
Okay. Does everybody have this sheet?
Which one is that?
The mindful practices?
Mindful practices?
Okay.
It's just a different way of looking at how we run our lives, or kind of go through. Go ahead.
Well, just a word or 2. Probably what challenged Jim the most was figuring out how to condense what he really wanted to tell you in just an hour. And we could have...
An hour and 5 minutes.
Yes, and we could have been here, frankly, all day, because the wealth of information that Jim has on this topic is considerable. And it was hard to sort of discern what would be best suited for our environment and what you might be most interested in. And so, needless to say, Jim has been very, very charitable, and he says if you really have a sincere interest in this information, he is more than happy to be connected through me to talk to you directly for free.
Give you resources,
Do whatever.
talks,
Yeah.
videos, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
whatever.
And so, thank you, Jim,
Oh,
for that
you're welcome.
very kind
You're welcome.
offer. And we do have a little bit of homework which is centered around the idea of how do you manage the stress you have in your life. And so this is a personal assessment of the kind of stress you have, and then a little list of questions that you might consider about how you approach those stressors in your life. But I hope that you will, having reflected on this, go back and look at this handout on the mindful practices and see which of those practices you might need to apply in order to feel better on a regular basis. So, having said that, I want to thank all of you for coming today. And thank you, Jim,
You're
for
welcome, thank you.
the wonderful hour. And
Thank you.
let's